Today, we're talking about something that every dungeon master has struggled with at some point: when to say no to your players.
There's a lot of pressure on DMs to say yes to everything, to keep the game moving, to empower player creativity, to avoid being that DM. And most of the time, yes is the right answer.
But not always. Because some ideas don't fit the tone of your campaign. Some break the rules of the game. Some even break the world entirely. And some just make the game worse for everyone else at the table.
So, in this video, we're going to walk through the moments when you absolutely can and should say no as a DM. We'll also talk about how to say it, when to hold firm, and just as importantly, when not to. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
So, the first area where you actually should feel empowered to say no to your players is when they bring a character concept that just doesn't fit your campaign. We often tell players that are new to D&D and tabletop role-playing games, you can be anything you want in D&D. And while the spirit behind that is 100% true, it's not a literally true statement.
Not every character works in every setting. Some concepts clash with the tone, the narrative, or the expectations of the group. I want to play a lone wolf assassin who doesn't work with the party. That sounds great as an idea for a short story, but it's actually a terrible one for a cooperative game that's about teamwork.
There's often this increasing temptation to say yes to joke characters or quirky gimmicks. A player who wants to play a sentient loaf of bread, or an awakened slime, or a psychic baby dragon. Or maybe you've got a player at your table who always makes a character whose name is a pun, like humongous, and they are constantly cracking jokes and puns. This stuff is admittedly very funny. And silly or ironic character concepts can be hilarious, and they're great for one-shots and comedy-themed campaigns. I think that we see a lot of this in actual plays like Dimension 20 and Legends of Evantris, where comedy is the focus of what we're watching. But if the rest of your table is playing grounded and sincere characters, I think the joke characters can really derail the experience for everyone else.
Then, of course, there is also stuff that a player might bring to the table that just simply crosses the line. They might mean well. They could come with a character and they were trying to decide on a flaw, so they say, my character is constantly drunk and hits on everything that moves. Or there's this idea, and I sort of think of Legend of Zelda inspiring this for me. I want to play a child adventurer. Even if the player means well, this kind of thing can be awkward or just plain inappropriate at the table. You're 100% within your rights to shut it down immediately.
Especially if the player is proposing a character concept that is based on a offensive, harmful, or just false stereotype of someone or something in the real world. Now, a good session zero can stop a lot of these problems before they start. It's the perfect time to set expectations, discuss themes, and lay out any requirements that you might have for character creation.
As the DM, you're absolutely allowed to set limits that fit your campaign proposal. If your setting is a low fantasy, cottagecore world inspired by the Shire, like the one that we're going to be running next that Monty's been working on, it's perfectly reasonable to say everyone is playing a humble hero and all characters should be halflings or humans.
You are not being controlling when you pitch a concept for your campaign that imposes requirements for the player characters. You're curating an experience with this very specific tone and style. That said, if you are going to set specific and especially extremely strict requirements, you've got to make sure that it's something that your players are genuinely excited about and that they want to do. You don't want to do something that is so narrow in scope that they can't make a character they actually want to play. I personally would not be interested at all in playing a game where all the spellcasting classes were just banned outright. I'm that I wouldn't want to play D&D in that case. Maybe another campaign.
We run an actual play series where we are all very heavily collaborating on the types of stories we wish to tell. And that works for us. So when Monty does lay out a bunch of restrictions for the upcoming campaign, it's something that we've had many discussions about.
Yeah.
But you need to find the tone that works for you and your table. If you're doing a Spelljammer campaign, a player coming to you with a sentient ooze named Astro Gooman might work a lot better than it would in your gritty undead low magic campaign.
Sometimes it's about matching the right characters to the right campaigns and sometimes even the right game system. And of course, you should be open-minded to your players' ideas and work with them to find a way to fit things in. And when something doesn't work, instead of just saying no outright, you might want to say, "Hey, this idea that you have sounds like a lot of fun and it might work perfectly in another game, but I'm not really sure it's the right match for this campaign. Maybe we can tweak it into something that better fits the story we're telling together. Maybe there's something about that joke concept that just with a little bit more seriousness can actually be the core of a really memorable character." This isn't limiting player creativity. This is about channeling that into something that's going to work with the table and not against it.
And if your players aren't excited about the concept, that's okay too. It might mean you all need to have a conversation and settle on a different campaign idea that everyone can get behind. Saying no to a character concept isn't shutting someone down, it's making sure everyone is building towards the same story together.
The next area where you can absolutely say no is when interpreting the rules and adjudicating player actions. And just like character concepts can sometimes really go off the rails, so can players' actions, especially when they start asking to bend the rules to do things that the game was just never designed to handle.
You're absolutely allowed to say no when a player wants to do something that just doesn't work within the rules. And that goes double when they start invoking real world physics to justify game breaking results. Classic examples like, can I cast create water inside the bandit's lungs? Or I want to use heat metal on the giant's blood because naturally, blood has iron in it, right? Or the famous Ant Man and Thanos question, I polymorph into a flea and crawl into the enemy's ear, then explode. We've all heard something like this, and sure, it might sound clever, but D&D isn't a physics simulator. It's a shared storytelling game with abstract mechanics. You don't need to let a loophole hijack your table.
And just because a player rolled a natural 20 doesn't mean that anything goes either. I got a nat 20 on my persuasion check. Now it's like mind control and the king has to give me his crown, right? No. High rolls don't override believability. A player character doesn't get to jump to the moon or seduce a dragon just because they rolled a nat 20.
Players also don't get to demand rolls every time they say a skill's name out loud. Just because someone yells,
Insight check!
doesn't mean one's actually called for. Mind you, Ginny's insight check when she was playing with us was hilarious. So sometimes it works, but other times, just because somebody yells something out doesn't mean it automatically goes, especially if the NPC is telling the truth and there's nothing to detect.
That said, when a player is proposing something that either seems to break the rules, or maybe you think it's foolish, or it's just impossible, it's actually worth taking a moment to double check their intent. They might have misunderstood the situation, the rules. This is especially true for spells. Sometimes players read the name of the spell, but not what the spell actually does, and therefore they are missing some key information. So instead of saying no outright, just try asking, what are you hoping to do here? Or getting the player to talk you through what they want to do. And you can always ask, are you sure that's what you want to try?
That way you can clear up any confusion, set expectations, and still let them make the call with full understanding of the risks. Saying no isn't about controlling the story, it's about making sure everyone is playing the same game.
Now, in a similar vein to adjudicating the rules, the next area where you absolutely want to feel empowered to say no is when a player's idea is just going to break the world entirely or disrupt the narrative past the point of no return.
Player creativity is something to embrace to a point, but part of your role as a DM is maintaining the logic and consistency of the world. That's why the rules exist, to give structure to the chaos.
It might be fun in theory for the artificer to roll to split the atom. But if you're running a high fantasy campaign where even there's airships, you don't even that doesn't mean that nuclear physics are on the table, right? And then you got like classic exploits like the peasant railgun, where a bunch of people use readied actions to accelerate a spear to light speed, or when the fighter drops a bag of rats to provoke an opportunity attack so that they get a bunch of extra like cleaves and build up a bunch of temporary hit points for reducing enemies to 0 hit points, right? Or then you've got like the infamous simulacrum wish loop, where a high level character casts simulacrum, then has their copy cast wish, then wish to regain simulacrum, and repeat forever. And these things are technically clever, but if you let this happen, it is going to break your game. Suddenly, your players are immortal cloning factories with infinite wishes, and even though that's the logical conclusion of the rules, you don't need to allow that.
Even when it's not technically breaking the rules, some ideas still stretch the internal logic of the campaign. Why don't we just hire every mage in the kingdom to handle this threat for us? Or, with my 3 months of downtime, can I craft and sell enough magic items to become the richest man alive? In the right kind of game, those ideas could spark fun side quests or kingdom building adventures, but in a more focused, narrative driven campaign, they might completely derail the story.
And that is okay. You are allowed to say, this not really what this campaign is about. I think that in these cases, this is an example of allowing the players to optimize the fun out of the situation. Like, part of it is the players do have to buy in to the campaign itself and the narrative itself. And so it's on you to protect the integrity of that narrative, and so that their choices matter and they get to do the fun stuff like fight the big bad and go on the adventure. Like, don't you if your players are proposing something that is going to just result in everyone just sitting around the table being like, "Oh, this is great having these wizards solve this problem for us." What was the point of you playing?
And speaking of not letting wizards solve all of your problems, there's like an double entendre there.
Oh, yeah.
You could be playing in our campaign setting. So before we dive into the next section, we want to take a moment to talk about our Drakenheim books and how you can bring the world of our campaigns to your table.
If you love dark fantasy, eldritch horror, and crumbling cities filled with scheming factions and contaminated magic, where your player characters really do get to indulge their creativity and explore a player-driven experience, you're going to really want to check out our adventure Dungeons of Drakenheim and our expansion books Monsters of Drakenheim and Sebastian Crow's Guide to Drakenheim.
Whether you're looking for new monsters, adventures, subclasses, or a full setting to run your next campaign, these books are packed with content, all designed to help you play your way.
And best of all, they're written by some pretty cool dudes.
We think we're cool. Our moms say we're cool.
My mom does not say I'm cool.
Oh, sorry.
Monsters of Drakenheim is now available on D&D Beyond as well. And if you want a physical copy or you want to grab the deluxe sets, accessories, or bonus content, late pledges are still open. And you can also get copies of Dungeons of Drakenheim and Sebastian Crow's Guide to Drakenheim through our publisher, Ghostfire Gaming.
And if you prefer to run your games online, we've got official modules for Foundry, VTT, and Roll20. Everything's fully integrated and ready to go.
So you can bring the contamination of Drakenheim to your group, whether you're playing in person, online, or whatever format, whatever platform you want to use. Check out the links in the description below to learn more, or you can head over to drakenheim.com. And just if you enjoy the show, picking up one of our books is one of the best ways to support everything that we do here on YouTube, while bringing some amazing new stuff to your game table as well.
And you can riddle your players with toxic contamination. And speaking of toxic,
the next area where you're absolutely allowed to say no is when a player's in-game actions become toxic or disruptive, even if the character concept itself isn't the problem. This is sort of an extension of the character creation issue, but in these cases, the red flag isn't what the character is, it's what the player is doing.
One of the most common excuses you'll hear is, "It's what my character would do." Sometimes that's offered in good faith, but more often it's used to justify behavior that's selfish, antagonistic, or disruptive to the rest of the table. If a player is constantly running off, refusing the quest, or undermining the party's goals, you're allowed to say, "This isn't working." and you can ask them to roll up a new character, one who actually wants to participate in the story and work with the group.
Now, there are situations where the issue just isn't disruptive, like not going on, like refusing the adventure hooks and going off and doing your own thing. Sometimes a player brings something into your game that is just crossing a line. These can be things like sexualized content, or graphic violence, or graphic torture scenes. If something comes up that makes you or your players uncomfortable, you don't need to allow that to happen at your table. You can and you should stop the scene and say no.
Tell the player that this course of action is taking the game in a direction you're not comfortable with and ask them to pivot or try a different approach. This isn't railroading, it's enforcing an agreed upon boundary, one that keeps the game fun and safe for everyone.
By the way, session 0 is where you establish those boundaries. It's the perfect place to talk through the tone of your game, set expectations for behavior, and make sure that everyone knows what kind of content is welcome and what isn't. If you want to have an anything goes game where sexual stuff and torture and whatever happens, power to you. Like, I've been in groups where that totally flies. There are other groups where maybe you're playing with a group of 12-year-olds or kids or whoever. You should have those conversations. And once those expectations are set, you're absolutely within your rights to hold your players to them.
Now, just as important as all of these times that you can and should say no, when shouldn't you say no? Before we wrap up, let's talk about when not to say no. Don't say no just because your players are being clever. Your players love finding unexpected solutions. They love outsmarting the villain, bypassing your puzzle, or hijacking your carefully planned encounter with a weird spell and a ladder. Let them. Get excited for them. Celebrate them when they outmaneuver you. Also, don't shut down improvisation or emotional moments just because they weren't planned.
If your players are deep in character, pouring their hearts out, don't cut them off with a joke or try to move the story along too quickly. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a DM is say nothing. Just sit back and let the scene breathe. And be especially careful not to say no just to protect your plot. If your players throw a wrench in your plans, don't slam the brakes. Pivot, adapt, and move forward with their choices. This is one of the most powerful skills a DM can develop, carrying the story forward regardless of what the players throw at you.
Now, of course, there's a balance here. There's a difference between being clever and being disruptive. There's a difference between unexpected ideas that advance the story and ones that derail it entirely. The key is knowing the difference and being ready to say yes when it matters most.
That sounds like you're invoking nuance again, Kelly.
Uh-oh,
We had a
nuance.
What it comes down to is let your players act boldly and use your judgment. Give them the space to be smart, emotional, and surprising, and don't be afraid of giving them a little bit more rope. You can make that the rope that they hang themselves with when you can shape the consequences. Because D&D isn't about just enforcing your story. It's about building one together.
So that's a look at when to say no as a DM when you're playing D&D at your table. You should feel empowered to use this to make the game a better experience for everyone. Again, we said it so many times, and we say it so many times in all of our videos. Session 0 is a great place to solve a lot of these problems and make sure everybody's on the same page going into the game. I've heard a lot of people out there say, well, we don't need a Session 0. We all know each other, and that's great. But I even we're having conversations right now about our next campaign, and really the conversations are just making sure we're all on the same page, making sure we know what the stories we want to tell are, making sure that the tone is what we're all going for, and we're all contributing to that. When we actually are going to be sitting down to play, it's going to be a richer experience because we all know what we want out of that game. And D&D is a much better experience when everybody knows what they want. So if you enjoyed this episode and you have some rules and guidelines that you use at your table to help you adjudicate the rules, say no, and know when to say yes, tell us about those in the comments below.
Finally, the videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. In addition to picking up our books, supporting our Patreon is one of the best ways to help this channel continue to make great content. You also get a bunch of great perks like bonus content, extra videos, early access to our videos, and much more. Follow the links in the description below to join.
And if you want to see a DM saying no to his players all the time whenever they try absolutely wild shenanigans that break the game, you can check out our actual play series on the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check all the episodes out right up over here.
And we've got plenty more advice for Dungeon Masters right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.